Well, the Justice Department has now received a new and far-reaching subpoena in the botched Fast and Furious gun-running operation. Republican Congressman Issa, who was heading the congressional investigation into the program, has sent subpoenas to the Attorney General Eric Holder and a dozen other Justice Department officials, not just internally, but also wanting to know about their communications with the White House. Mr. Holder was asked about this yesterday, and here is his response.
We have sent thousands of pages of documents up to the Hill. We'll look at the subpoenas. I'm sure we will undoubtedly comply with them. But what I want the American people to understand is that in complying with those subpoenas and dealing with that inquiry, that will not detract us from the important business that we have here to do with the Justice Department, including matters like the one that we have announced today. Thank you.
Whether you or anyone else in the Department knew about the controversial tactics?
And that was the end of the press conference. Joining me now, Monica Crowley, radio talk show host and Fox News contributor, and Dan Gerstein, CEO of Gotham Ghostwriters and a Democratic strategist. The heat on this case continues to go up, Monica, and many people believe that this goes much higher than the government has admitted to us thus far. The Department of Justice initially said the whistleblower who revealed this was wrong and that there was no such operation. Now we know that there is, and the Republicans in Congress are getting more and more aggressive about trying to find out how high it goes. What are the stakes for Eric Holder now that he and his department have been subpoenaed?
Stakes are huge on this. This scandal is not going away. And remember, the old political adage in Washington is it's never the actual crime that gets you in trouble or the actual event. It's always the cover-up. I don't know if there's a cover-up or not here. What I think Issa is trying to do, and the Republicans in Congress on the Oversight Committee, is try to get to the bottom of this. They're trying to investigate because, remember, the Attorney General of the United States went before Congress and claimed in May that he had just heard several weeks before about the program. Right.
And now he's doubled down on that in the letter.
The program called Fast and Furious, right. Now we've got emails, we've got other documentation that suggests that the Attorney General knew 10 months before that.
He says he didn't read the memos. He said it was staffers who read those memos and didn't filter any information up to him because the memos didn't call to his attention or anybody's attention the controversial nature of this program. So there was no reason for the underlings to say, hey, Eric, look at this, take a look at this operation. But is it plausible, Dan? Because ATF, which did do this operation, and the DEA are under the Department of Justice. We had a debate on this the other day. They are. ATF used to be under Treasury. It's under Justice now. This is under the Justice Department's watch. So how could he not know?
Well, I mean, you go back and you look at a lot of the ways that the Attorney General handled difficult cases, and his decision-making and his judgment, there's a lot of things that you have to call into question. I'm not going to get into the specifics of this case because, to be honest with you, I think it's a trivial, small matter that is out of proportion. Not to say that there wasn't a screw-up. People didn't do things wrong, but the amount of time we're spending on this and compared to a lot of the other examples of corruption in our government, lack of regulation, mistakes of government, this is clearly a partisan-driven attack to try and exploit a weakness of the Obama administration.
Mr. Holder suggested as much in his letter. Is it a fair point?
No, it's not, because what we're talking about here is a gun-running operation out of a major bureaucracy, a major agency of the United States government, the Department of Justice. What he's asking us to believe is that the Attorney General of the United States was not made aware of a gun-running operation across an international border, Megan. This is not an operation between Arizona and New Mexico. This is between two countries. The Attorney General wants us to believe that he had no idea, was not briefed on it, not paying attention to the memos coming across his desk.
Not even when Brian Terry was killed.
And that was my next point, that this operation went so awry at one point that now we have these guns that were being filtered to Mexican drug cartels, for goodness sakes, traced to the death of a federal agent, the border agent Brian Terry. You're telling me that the Attorney General
was December of 2010.
No
he says he didn't know about it until April of 2011.
Okay, so that is his story, but I think the congressional investigation is saying, well, wait a minute, let's get to the bottom of this. Is that story correct or not?
Dan, now folks are pointing out, and you suggested it just now, that Eric Holder, with respect to him, because, I mean, he's got a tough job, but that he has a history of not knowing when he should have known. And there are a few examples that folks are teeing up. He suggested we close Gitmo, apparently with not enough investigation. He suggested we try Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in New York without talking to the folks in New York who obviously didn't want it. None of those things happened. And then he was somebody who, when he was Deputy Attorney General under Clinton, your guy, who you worked for, argued for the pardon of Mark Rich.
Well, I didn't work for the president. I was a fan of his, but...
Okay. He argued for the pardon of Mark Rich, which ultimately was handed down. It was really controversial, and Eric Holder had to go testify before Congress when he was being confirmed as our Attorney General, and they wanted to know, did you investigate that case before you suggested this guy get pardoned? Take a look at this exchange he had with Arlen Specter and his defense.
Were you aware of this kind of a record this man had?
No, I was not, and that was one of the mistakes that I made. I did not really acquaint myself with his record. I knew that the matter involved, it was a tax fraud case, it was a substantial tax fraud case. I knew that he was a fugitive, but I did not know a lot of the underlying facts that you have described. And as I said, that was a mistake.
Then he was confronted about whether he had read the Arizona immigration law that he was highly critical of and suing over, and here's that exchange.
And I understand that you may file a lawsuit against the law. It seems to me the administration ought to be enforcing border security and immigration laws and not challenge them, and that the administration is on the wrong side of the American people. Have you read the Arizona law?
I have not had a chance to. I've glanced at it. I have not read it.
It's 10 pages.
That has people asking, how can President Obama come out and say that this man still has his full confidence?
You know, it's a mystery to me. I never supported his nomination.
Really?
I think he's a good lawyer, but he's a terrible politician. And the Attorney General of the United States is a political job. There's no question about it. You have to interface with Congress. You have to be a spokesman to the American people. You have to inspire confidence. Eric Holder, whatever his skills are, is not good at the politics of this. And to me, the worst case was the Sheikh Mohammed trial and the lack of consultation he did with the New York political establishment. He would have known right away that regardless of the merits of the case, that this would be cause such a firestorm.
Which it did.
That would undermine public confidence. And it did.
Should the president re-examine his full confidence in the Attorney General politically? I mean, has he become an albatross to the president politically?
Yes, but not to the extent where Obama is ready to cut him loose yet. It hasn't reached critical mass. If these subpoenas go forward, they were issued today, and Eric Holder has been caught in perjury, caught in misleading Congress, and some other details about this case, then
so
I think
incompetence
it will
isn't going to do it.
It
has to be malfeasance.
Well, I think Obama is very loyal to his people, and in many cases
Sometimes
that's
to
a positive, but in many cases it's a negative, and we saw that with President Nixon and Watergate, holding on to detrimental people for far too long. If this guy reaches critical mass and it starts damaging Obama's re-election prospects, he's going to cut him loose the way he cut Jeremiah Wright loose.
I would agree. I mean, he has become a political liability, but the thing is, it won't hurt him with voters because the economy is such a dominant issue right now. Well, it's just not relevant to people's lives.
Interesting. Dan, Monica, thank you both so much.